right now we're entering a phase where I believe from our own meditation, from our own meditation practice, and working with a sort of mindful living, and how to actually apply that to every aspect of our life is, I think, can actually help the direction of the world. And so I feel like, we're coming to this new territory. And certainly in the West, and certainly in this particular time, we're trying to find other ways of solving the issues that are taking place. Explore how they're having sort of fresh perspective, fresh eyes, and looking at the relationships in their life and seeing how they can actually see that as an opportunity to, better themselves, but also better the world.
Good afternoon, Rinpoche.
Afternoon.
I'm very happy to be here with you to have a conversation in this incredible place as part of the Mindful Relationships Summit.
Mm-hmm.
And thought we'd begin to just ask if you could say a bit for the people watching this about your role as the Sakyong, or Earth Protector.
I think my role as Sakyong, it's a Tibetan title, meaning Earth Protector, and it is sort of my role and honor and responsibility to practice and trying to manifest the teachings of Shambhala, which is really about the notion of good-hearted warriorship, sort of a non-aggressive warriorship, and in particular how we live our life and how we live each moment. And I think part of my role is being a leader and a guide for those, warriors and practitioners and meditators who really are trying to mix some kind of deep inner aspect of who they are, spiritual aspect, that mindful aspect, sort of a deeper purpose of life with their everyday life.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people are talking about meditation and interested in meditation at this time, but it seems like a common view that meditation is sort of a solitary or individual path. And can you say something about the Shambhala idea of enlightened society that might be a little different from individual?
Well, I think meditation is something that is, I feel, really critical, I guess you could say, or really important to the time right now that we're facing in the world. At the very least, it's going to bring a sense of peace to a person, a sense of their own life. Mm-hmm. And in a very simple way, it adds less, that helps by having less sort of confusion and aggression just generally in the world. So I think for a personal journey, it's wonderful. And I know a lot of people are getting a lot out of just mindfulness practice, awareness practice, right. Compassion practice. And also what I've been trying to encourage, within the, Shambhala community and beyond, really, is a practice of Shambhala meditation. And it's really something that I've myself, I would say, discovered and cultivated. And I think part of that is that, it's really to do with connecting with how we feel as human beings. Because I feel like inherently meditation is kind of socially sort of connected and socially relevant. Mm. And I feel like when many people sit down to meditate, they're sitting down as a person, but then they're also, the society is sitting down and meditating. And so all the woes and all the joys too of society, we're dealing with on the meditation seat. And so right now, this notion of how our personal practice affects society, I think it's a very important question. Mm-hmm. Because we can't just sort of meditate our way out of the situation. Right. There's a lot of intensity and we have to sort of participate. So meditation can make us stronger so that we can participate and be more strong and genuine. At the same time, I feel like if we allow others, let's say pain and other suffering and sort of uncertainty in the world touch us, then we feel like maybe we're more connected and then we're more apt to engage and participate. And so I feel like meditation can be an incredibly important stepping stone by how we actually transform society. And that really comes down to how is that going to happen? It comes through personal experience. And it's through personal experience that we therefore actually, begin to affect change.
So since this is a relationship summit, how would you say relationships are vital to the idea of having an enlightened society or a more uplifted society?
I mean, I think it's at the core of society, right?
Yeah.
So, what I like to say is just you and me. Mm-hmm. It's just the two of us. And even though, it's very complicated, society is many relationships and we have many kind of relationships, but it really comes down to how we relate to another person, right. How we regard another person, whether we respect them or don't. That shows how we respect ourselves or don't. I think a lot of situations in society are the result of relationships. So we, things that we do well help us, things we don't hurt us. And so that can easily just multiply very quickly. And so I think a lot of us feel powerless in society because we feel like there's so many things going on.
Right.
But the reality is that we do have an effective way to, change things, and that's how we relate to somebody else. And whether that's a romantic relationship that we're with our partner, or whether it's more of a professional relationship at work, mm-hmm. Or just a social relationship among friends, I think that dynamics of how that is invisible osmosis. It really begins to affect society, begins to affect our own psychology and our own physiology. And so there's a lot, I think that happens. And innately humans are social creatures, social,
sure, yeah.
Engaged. Mm. So, I think that's why there's interest in this subject of relationship in society. By having that relationship with another person, sort of the bottom line, as it were, with any relationship is we feel less alone. So when we have a partner and we see, the sunrise or have a problem, whatever it is, we have someone to share with. And I think a lot of situations in life where we face problems and challenges, we need someone else to talk with it, to support us. There's things we don't see, somebody else sees, and vice versa. So, I think it is, people have done it, but it's challenging when you have to just do it on your own. So I think, some kind of healthy relationship is fundamental to the pleasure of life and the livability of life. And, in the sense of we feel less alone on the planet and in our lives.
Right. It's also seems to be such an issue today that a lot of people say they feel like they're living in isolation mm-hmm. because of technology, because of working remotely, because of our heads being down into gadgets. And so how, as you have said, in this time of endless gadgets, how can we really connect with other people?
Well, I think, there's almost a search for connecting to our humanity through the gadgets, where we're trying to text and we're trying to communicate and we're looking into the devices and the devices that are there to promote human, good health. And so there is something innocent, I guess, about the whole thing. Mm. At the same time, there's obviously something that, could potentially be problematic where we begin to distance ourselves from each other. We don't relate to the person next to us. We're on the phone. Therefore, we don't know how they feel, and therefore, the relationship doesn't go well. And all of a sudden, it has a dramatic effect on both of us. But we're not aware of that because we've lost the skill, the skill of how you feel a person, how you know what they're doing and what they're thinking. And I think it really comes down to caring,
Right.
So it's complicated. I feel like we're also in a society where people want to be acknowledged. So they like to receive messages and things.
Sure. And
so on one hand, it's fairly straightforward. On the other hand, we also have to have some altruism. We also have to care about other people. And that's part of our nature, is to care about other people. And so I think there is a bit of a skew where somehow culturally we begin to feel like we are inherently selfish creatures.
Right.
And, and I feel like right now they're actually doing research into this and realizing that in fact, compassion is also an integral part of to being human and caring.
found it so interesting that you used the word skill when you were talking about how to interact with other people and how to have conversation. And do you feel like that's a skill that we can learn?
I think so. I mean, I feel like some of it's intuitive. Like when you're a baby, you are crying, and there's a connection or skill of somehow trying to communicate and connect with the world and your parents and so forth.
Right, like you have that instinct that babies want to talk.
Yeah,
to us.
You walk by them, they immediately pick up, and
yeah.
It's not like it doesn't matter who you are, they connect, and then that gets cultivated. But it does need to be cultivated and brought out, and because we're very fragile and we're very vulnerable in that way, and so it's a skill, and that has to be taught by other humans.
Sure.
It has to be taught by people who care about us, and I think that makes us stronger. And so that's also part of relationship is between generations, and for the species, as it were, and how we raise the next generation.
Yeah, and what culture we create within that. That makes me think to ask you about your relationship with your father. What you feel you learned through that relationship?
Well, he was a great meditation master and leader, and sort of gentleman, and also had gone through a tremendous amount himself, having escaped from Tibet,
right.
Having come to the West, presented, one of the first people to present meditation, mindfulness, Buddhism, and then ultimately, he taught a lot about Shambhala and warriorship, basic goodness. So he taught a lot of that, and but he was all those things. But what I remember and what I hold dear is obviously his love and affection, and also I think his, really trying to connect on a human level. And I think that humanness is also what I feel like he was trying to communicate. And I feel like mindfulness and meditation and all these are very human activities. And so that was a very important part of his, transmission of his wisdom was that it's not something otherworldly or, too transcendent, but that it is completely reachable and doable. And in fact, the more sort of disconnect we have from our own humanity, then that much longer our spiritual path really is, right? So
that's what they tell us.
Yeah.
So how has your view of the importance of relationships changed since you have become a married man in your relationship with your wife, the Sakyong Longmo?
Sort of fundamental shift in anybody's life, obviously, and in my life is no different. That there was somebody who I could share my life with, and I have somewhat of a unique situation.
You sure do, yeah.
And so there was somebody who I could share that with. Became and has and is a journey in terms of sharing your life, sharing your space, and sharing the challenges and the joys and everything. So it's been, a learning experience. I would say a deepening experience, and also I think it's a great test of your meditative skills.
Well said. And then when you add the challenges of fatherhood into the mix as well, and the abundance of opportunities to engage with children, what would you say about the father-child relationship?
Well, I think altruism and selflessness is no longer an option in that case. So it's hard to be a parent and be too selfish. You have to really, be there for somebody else and sharing their life with them. And so I feel like for me, it really expanded your heart, expanded your scope of what you thought you could handle in some ways, and also there's a tremendous responsibility, of course, dealing with another person and so forth. So it really makes you grow up. It makes you really evaluate your principles in life, because it's not just your journey now, it's somebody else's journey. So, it's been good that way.
It must be especially daunting with when your first child comes into your life, and it's a huge life change.
Yes, it's still a pleasant surprise.
I wanted to ask, what role do you think that the ability to have good communication and good conversation plays in all of our relationships? Children, siblings, spouses, friends.
Communication, and especially I would say just simple conversation, I feel like is a key glue or binding factor, or it makes life livable and pleasurable. And how we do that, how we communicate and how we converse, in many ways makes society go around, makes the world go around. And so I would say there are intense conversations and discussions, but then also just the ordinary conversations are just as important in many ways, in order to have life actually have some stability and sanity, I think, for all of us.
And it seems like sometimes it's also a big wake-up call, and we have challenging conversations, especially in romantic relationships. How can we work with those challenging conversations when what's known as klesha in Buddhist language, or our habitual patterns keep coming up? How do we maintain good communication in relationships?
Well, I think first of all you have to keep trying, because I'm not sure if any one technique works, but I feel like that we all go through different ways of having strong emotions, and sometimes it's very personal, and sometimes it's very conditioned. Some things have happened to us, and history and so forth. Yeah, so I feel like and it's really about how you at least try to work with it and really take it as a journey. And I think sometimes what gets us stuck is when we just think it's repetitive, and how we actually can see each situation and try to work with it. And but I think it takes strength, it takes imagination, and it takes it takes skill, perseverance, exertion. It takes a lot of things in order to work through any of these, because it's not just having the exact words, the right sort of dialogue, but it's also your mindset and approach. A lot of our experiences in life comes down to very simple interactions often. So working with people which I do, they're either very sick and either dying, and also in difficult situations. Often what people reflect on is it's not necessarily their life accomplishments, but it's the simple things, and simple relationships and friendships, and also what we have remorse about is those simple things too. Often we didn't do something, and I feel like that conversation and just having a little interaction is actually adds up over time, and that it begins to taint the quality of our life. And conversely, if we don't have a series of satisfying moments and little communication, it begins to, color the waters of our life, and we become either bitter, or we become, resentful, or whatever it may be. And again, and at the same time, if you have that, it adds a more depth and character and to life. And so, conversation this way is our way of communicating with our own life, just not in our head, but actually with that.
Right.
And it also, we become socially, we become a social strength, and we're adding to the social fabric and strength of society. So we're our ethics, or our view of life, and the principles which we feel are important, are being put into the society.
or become known? Because if you just kept it to yourself, it's like no one may ever know what your ethics or your feelings are.
Yeah, and I think conversation is really, it's about being, sensitive and allowing for, the feelings of others, and it's actually the ability to have concern for others. So, you may have a conversation that's fairly simple and benign, but it eases another person, and there may not be a big point to it, but it helps them, and then that it could affect their whole day, or more. And so, it's not, it's us kind of, conversation that way is kind of our bigger, more magnanimous side coming out.
It sounds like listening is also a big part of having the conversation, like allowing the other person to share.
What did you say? I hope so. I mean, I think, I always joke that, listening is the price you pay if you want to be heard, right? So, so if you want someone to listen to you, you have to listen to them at least, and that's part of the natural dialogue, right?
Part of the exchange. It's particularly interesting right now because it seems like a lot of people are saying that relationships they've had over a long time have become more strained because of the very polarized opinions about what's going on in the world, and it's challenging for sometimes people to have a civil or decent conversation when they have opposing views. And do you have any thoughts about how to work with that?
Well, I mean, I think there's so many intense issues in the world, and I think maybe, they've always been there, but they come up more now because they're in the news, and even the best diplomats and politicians and negotiators are having a hard time. So if you're having an ordinary person, I mean, obviously, and they, having a conversation, of course, emotions and things are going to happen. But I feel like, it's like many things. If you have a difficult time with something that's challenging, then step back and work with something that you can manage. So having a conversation with somebody and talking about something that, you can sort of, have a less intense, dialogue. And you may not necessarily agree with the person on things, but you sort of respect them on some level, and you want to, they're a human being and they're there and they're going through things, and you want to communicate at that level. And so that's part of just appreciating the human exchange, and I think that the only way somehow we're going to progress out of this is finding ways to communicate. Obviously, not communicating is not going to get there, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not going to ease anything. Sounds like you're saying we have to find kind of an entry point.
Yeah, because I think culture is more complicated. Maybe there was a time where you have more people that have a similar view, but globalization and different ideas and themes that people find threatening, and it's challenging from that point of view. So there's this, I think, process we're going through globally of finding a language and finding a way to communicate that may not necessarily be evident.
One thing that I wanted to raise is that I've noticed with you and also with your wife, the Sakyong Wangmo, I've never seen either of you get into like gossip or insulting people, complaining about your lives, and I wondered if you feel like that's something we should try to work with. Does that sort of help our style of communication and our conversation, refraining from that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to particularly, have my opinions on life. People have to make their own decisions. But but obviously how you communicate and what you say and and so forth obviously reflects who you are and what you do, and so I think part of that is is that how you want to be seen and relating to things. And I feel like on the one hand there's so many things that you could be complaining about, there's so many things that are going wrong and things like that. And it's almost like, what do where do you decide to pick the moment in terms of what you want to express? And I think part of the Shambhala teaching, I guess, is trying to overcome that sense of aggression, and sort of, and whether that be mentally or emotionally, and that sometimes the way you express yourself verbally is kind of your dissatisfaction and inner turmoil is being expressed.
Sure.
And I think for a lot of people that's often why they complain and obviously why things are going on, because they don't know how else to express it. And so I think there's that approach, and the other is just sort of obviously, how are the things you're going to lead life? You can say in a basic way, a more positive approach of what are the things you're trying to uplift and raise your gaze and raise your energy.
On that note, can conversation bring out compassion in our lives and in the world?
I think having a simple conversation, compassion is a natural part of it, because you begin to feel, the word compassion really kind of, in English at least, it kind of means kind of to suffer with another. So you're actually, hearing their story, and then you're kind of there in that moment. And so it naturally arouses a sense of concern for the other person. And so, and I also feel like if you're going to have a conversation, you have to at least sympathize somehow with the person. Otherwise, it's hard to have a conversation, just one-sided.
Right.
So compassion is naturally there. And also, I think in Tibetan, compassion is nyingje, and nying is heart. Je is like noble. So there's a sense of the nobility of our being, where we're kind of, coming outside of ourselves and to encompass another person. And so the compassion is there. And also, I think compassion is a noble trait. It's something that is highly regarded. And so conversation can easily be an opportunity for people to explore their compassion and develop their compassion. And, just sitting there is compassionate, listening is compassionate, So it doesn't have to be too heavy duty.
Just connecting and...
Yeah. Those qualities are there, those virtues are there.
Is there anything else you wanted to share?
I think that right now we're entering a phase where I believe from our own meditation, from our own meditation practice, and working with a sort of mindful living, and how to actually apply that to every aspect of our life is, I think can actually help the direction of the world. And so I feel like, we're coming into this new territory, and certainly in the West, and certainly in this particular time, we're trying to find other ways of solving the issues that are taking place. And so I really encourage people to, meditate if they do, and explore that, and also explore how they're having sort of fresh perspective, fresh eyes, and looking at the relationships in their life and seeing how they can actually see that as an opportunity to, better themselves, but also better the world.